I want to go on to Sunai, and I want two things from you. Human Rights Watch, you monitor the situation. We know that the coverage of LM is very weak, that the media, all media, it has difficulty getting to it. I mean, we don't even know what's going on. So just tell us what you think the overall numbers are, how you go around that particular problem, how big is it? Second thing, is it getting worse? Kreisler brought up this whole interesting area about intelligent application of the law. And that's one of the huge problems that we have with the lèse-majesté law, that once it kicks in, it just goes off like a little Pac-Man and gobbles everybody up. So if you can't stop it at the very inception, you get into a very big problem, and people cannot escape it. So those are the two things I'd like you to focus on.
Okay. Thank you, Dominic. And hello to you all. I'm going to try my best, not sure. Right. I talked to Dave, Ajahn David Strick first just about pretty much the same questions that kind of giving us so much trouble about, getting the most accurate as possible, the statistics of charges and prosecution that have become intensified since the coup in 2006, which, that's the kind of, for us, the benchmark of this, obsession with the campaign to protect the monarchy at all costs. And to the extent that doing away with the constitutionally guaranteed freedoms and Thailand obligations under international human rights principles that have been forgone by this drive to protect the monarchy, of the campaign in quotation to protect the monarchy. I live right next to two military barracks in Bangkok, the cavalry barrack and the infantry. Both of them are royal guards. And they have campaigned for those high school students who attend National Guard training, the National Reserve training, to spend some time on the internet every day posting pro-monarchy comments on everybody else's web page and Facebook page, to the extent it becomes spam, but you can report it because it's all in the name of this quotation, protection of the monarchy, glorification of the monarchy, untouchable. It is a national campaign. It is a new national slogan. But all we have, coming back to what you said, is it's getting better or worse with the new administration of Prime Minister Yingluck, who has been in power for almost 3 years now, and who came to power. We all know that the protests on the street of Bangkok, the red shirt, which part of it at that time, the rhetoric of the red shirt was to challenge royal intervention in politics, to challenge the role of the palace in Thai politics. And that explained why, during the confrontations on the street of Bangkok between the government of Pisit Vejajiwa and the red shirt movement and part of the Pheu Thai parties, not part, but we have Kun Yingluck on stage from time to time in Raja Prasong too, which is, I would say, the entire Pheu Thai party, put it that way. It has very strong element of the role of the monarchy. And that explained, under the slogan of protecting the monarchy, glorification of monarchy, there was a surge of charges and prosecution using LM laws, not just the Article 112 of the Penal Code, but also the Computer Crimes Act, to charge and prosecute and silence critics, especially those from the red shirt, including Kun Somyot Phuksa Phasuk, who was one of the victims of that crackdown at the time. So that was the surge. And with the change of government, we had an impression that things would get better. The Yingluck government, the Pheu Thai MPs in the House, in the Parliament, will work together to improve the condition of freedom of expression in Thailand through the, first of all, allowing debate, public debate, open and frank debate about the abuse, the abuse and exploitation of lèse-majesté law, both Article 112 and Computer Crimes Act. That never happened, number one. Number two, it is true that under Yingluck administration, we see a reduction of charges and prosecution on LM offenses, for LM offenses. But is that because the government is getting more open-minded and in favor of reform, in favor of improvement, or because there is now a new political rhetoric to leave the palace out of the message from the red shirt? If you follow the red shirt very closely, it is the latter case. The role of the palace, the role of the Privy Council, the role of General Prem, General Surya Chulanon, both Privy Councillors, including the role of the military, who was the one who pulled trigger that killed the Red Shirt on the street of Bangkok, all disappear from the rhetoric of the Red Shirt. It is just about going after a physical state. So perhaps it is because the absence of the rhetoric about the palace among the political activism, within the realm of political activism, that lead to the reduction of cases. Not that the government is getting kinder, more reform-minded. And why I'm saying that? I'm saying that because Human Rights Watch has been in communication with different levels of the current government, from Prime Minister Yingluck, from the Justice Minister, from Deputy Prime Minister in charge of Police Affairs. All of them said that the reform of lèse-majesté law is too sensitive, too hot to be touched. And it will never be on the agenda of the government. So clearly, don't hope for it under this government. Number two, the renewed political confrontation, what we joke about now, that the yellow shirt turned black shirt, and the red shirt end up being aggressively defensive of the monarchy as much as the yellow shirt of the past. Prosecution of people who have different opinions using lèse-majesté laws, not just 112 but Computer Crime Act, have become political tools of both sides. I'm not shocking to see those who are now wearing black shirt trying to silence critics using lèse-majesté law. But I am very much appalled to see those who used to campaign for the reform, for the ending of lèse-majesté law, are now actively using lèse-majesté law against their political opponents. I'm talking about the red shirt. They are doing it too. You see red shirt, those who are having the seats in the parliament to those and having the position and getting on the stage right now, all in favor of Article 112. And when we talk about, those considered as political prisoners and the debate about amnesty in Thailand, there is unanimous agreement between the ultra-conservative, the judges, those appointed senators, those ultra-royalist protesters on the street, on the one hand, Democrat Party, and the red shirt, and Pheu Thai Party, to completely exclude those charged and convicted for lèse-majesté offense from any consideration of amnesty. It is written in the draft law. Every single draft law has an explicit clause to exclude lèse-majesté prisoners from any form of amnesty. So that is another reason why it is hopeless, why I say it is hopeless to see an improvement of the lèse-majesté crackdown under this government. The third one is that, probably talk about it, Presak talk about it, Kun Sukanya talk about it, is that we see more arbitrary anti-human rights interpretations by judges of lèse-majesté law, which has been stretched further and further and further, to the point that we cannot now have any historical study in a critical way anymore, because at least the invitation in this case since March this year, and we just had full text of the verdict with us now translated in English, saying that making critical comments that deem offensive, insulting of the previous monarch of Chakri dynasty, the current dynasty, will tantamount to offending the current monarch. Therefore, that considered an act of lèse-majesté, and that lead to similar prosecution as offending, threatening, insulting the current monarch. So how can we study what happened in the past of this current dynasty? It is now impossible. I'm not talking about, going on the street with political campaign, getting on radio with political campaign. This is basic academic freedom, to have a critical historical study about the history of Bangkok. No more. You cannot even talk about the invasion of Pattani in southern Thailand, why there is insurgency, because it's part of the act of this dynasty too. So you cannot talk about the problem in the south. Many problems will now kept under the rug no longer discuss, no longer criticize, no longer scrutinize and examine. So this is the climate that is going on now. It's getting gloomier and gloomier due to the lack of political will and political collusion not to discuss this issue. It is about the power of this, those who consider themselves as the guardian of lèse-majesté law has been expanded out of control. We are talking about the judiciary. They are doing everything that outside the existing due process. Let's use the case of Kun Somyot as an example. Kun Somyot was an editor of the Voice of Thaksin magazine, and there were two controversial articles appear in the magazine, written, as we all know, by Kun Jakrapop Phenkhair, former speaker of Thaksin Shinawatra when he was prime minister. But there is a printing act which protects editor from being prosecuted for the contents of the magazine. But in the case of the allegations against Somyot Phruksar Kasensu, it was about lèse-majesté, and that trumped the protection that editors enjoy under the Printing Act. So that is one thing. And then we have another case of Kun Jiranut, the manager of Pracha Thai website. She was accused of failing to remove lèse-majesté contents from the website promptly. And that is an offense for failing to remove it promptly. She removed it, but too slowly in the eyes of the judges. She was convicted, but the jail term was suspended. And then there was an appeal by her side, and the appeal court uphold the conviction and then suspended the jail term again. But the message is that intermediaries, editors, such as webmasters, are liable. So this law on the enforcement of the law and the interpretation of the law, in fact, push for censorship in the society of Thailand, enforce silencing of critical opinions in the society. And this is something that a government that claims to ride on a bandwagon of political reform should address. But no, what we see is the government is caving in fact, joining the prosecution, joining the witch hunting, joining the crackdown. So, it is time to try to get what we everyone was stunned by this whistleblower. I hate to call them whistleblowers because they didn't trigger any something to point out any wrongdoing to the extent that the definition of the whistleblower, but they simply blew whistles, okay? And they came out on a very strong social agenda, but sadly, the abuse and exploitation of lèse-majesté law, which undermine freedom of expression, academic freedom, and other important human rights are not at all on the agenda. So that's one thing. And the last point, because I think I'm the last speaker, I should not bore you by repeating others. We are deeply concerned that we have many lèse-majesté law keep coming out by the interpretation of the judges, as I said earlier, and the interpretation, especially by the Supreme Court, is considered as legal interpretation and serve as the law itself, right? So that's one thing. So the case of the Supreme Court saying that no more critical comments of the previous king of Chakri dynasty, that's one problem already. The second is that what Raisak talked about, the Intangible Cultural Heritage Bill, which was approved by the government Prime Minister Yingluck, again, just in October, very recently. And this bill will prohibit any offending, any mockery of the monarchy, which now not about the current monarchy, because of the interpretation of the Supreme Court judges, monarchy of the past as well, of Chakri dynasty. You cannot have any form of like, lam tat, playing choi, nang talung manora, that are critical. You cannot have like any poems that are critical. Even, comics, political comics, that will all be offensive to the monarchy and therefore subject to prosecution under this Intangible Cultural Heritage Act. So we are getting deeper and deeper into the era where where the institution, the individuals, and the law related to the palace, related to the monarchy, become so untouchable, become so sacred. And I will end with, the most recent attempt to propose an amendment of Article 112 ended up with one of the academic who led the campaign being punched in the head on the campus where he teaches by two outer-arriving thugs who still at large. So that is a message. When that happened, we have the army chief, we have Deputy Prime Minister, again, of this current administration saying that he deserved it. He deserved to be attacked because the law itself is untouchable, because the law protects the monarchy. Therefore, any attempt to amend the law, make the law less restrictive, less fearsome, is an offense to the institution. That is the climate of fear being built in Thailand by not just Article 112 and all those, but also those mini Article 112, Capital Crimes Act, and now the Intangible Cultural Heritage Bill, and plus interpretation of the law by the courts. So that will be very quick expression of my frustration about this law. And lastly, since he left already, we just then had the Special Rapporteur of the UN on freedom of expression with us in the room. I cannot see him anymore. Frank Raru was here. Thailand reserved its response to international comments about the enforcement of lèse-majesté law and the restriction of basic freedom using lèse-majesté law. During the last review on political and civil rights at the UN, Thailand received numerous questions on this issue, and it reserved the right not to answer single one issue, saying that this is Thailand, only Thai people know this problem, nobody dare to ask us. And Thailand is now applying for another term of UN Human Rights Council membership with this attitude. Should it deserve this being considered? I don't think so. Thank you.